This internal experience of unification, synesthesia, that's a really interesting word, I love it, synesthesia, will be understood as the inseparability of mind and nature, and in the power generated by the indissoluble unity of this experience, the edifice of modern civilization will disintegrate. As the climax and failure of the technology of the old mental house becomes increasingly apparent, obviously not without its difficulties and challenges, and amidst the chaotic backdrop of the collapsing old economic and political order, the transit to post-history shall begin. At the same time that the new mental house will be laying its foundations, the cumbersome, inert, mechano-chemical structure of the old will have to be dismantled. Yep, we're on it. This synchronous activity, formulation of the new and the cleansing and purification of the old will be the single driving force as the final cocoon is entered. Known as the Campaign for the Earth, the emergence of the physically unified, media-connected, locally operative planetary society will slowly take form, emerging by 2012 as the evolutionary design plan of universally interactive intelligence. I'm going to read that again. Known as the Campaign for the Earth, the emergence of the psychically unified, media-connected, locally operative planetary society will slowly take form, emerging by 2012 AD as the evolutionary design plan of universally interactive intelligence. While it is best to let forthcoming events tell their own story as the 5-year span 87 to 92 of the world revolutionary event of harmonic convergence unfolds, let us turn to the Mayan factor for a structural description of the counterspin harmonic of post-history. How can we envision post-history? What does it mean to speak of the crafting of the planet light body? How is the radiogenic keyboard of the planet light body experienced at the human level? Let us imagine that we are not extra but super terrestrials, examining the resonant fluctuations of planet Earth. Our means of inspection is the 260-unit radiogenetic keyboard, the Tzolk'in. Our focus is upon its 64 central units. The inscribed is this 64-unit matrix. In this 64-unit matrix is the code and game plan of human destiny, the path beyond technology. Because of the design of the binary flow pattern, the loom of Maya, this 64-unit matrix is referred to as the crossover polarity zone. In other words, just as the chief feature of DNA is a double helix pattern by which a field is created for the crossing over of information from either molecular strand to the other, so the loom of Maya pattern can be envisioned as a crossing over to either side of the mystic central column of the two symmetrical flows comprising the pattern of galactic activation. The moment of this pattern of 4 units to the right and left of the central column defines the 64-unit symmetrical field. The 64-unit keyboard, quote-unquote, is the genetic matrix of transformation which unifies the entire 260-unit Tzolk'in, spelled Tzolkin. The remainder of the Tzolk'in, aside from the neural valued 20-unit mystic column, breaks down into 144 units of a 4-phased radiant energy body and 32 units of an 8-part crystal symmetry body. The total of 12 4 radiant energy and 8 crystal symmetry fields of the Tzolk'in contain the code information describing the pre- and post-genetic radiance of galactic unfolding. The 13th field of the Tzolk'in is, of course, at the center and represents the DNA. Modeling the pre- and post-technological formula defining history, DNA is the transformational matrix holding together primordial and synthesizing phases of radiant and crystalline energy activation. By its centrality in the overall matrix, the function of DNA is to vitalize the entire galactic activation pattern. As a fractal of the galactic whole and of the geometry of DNA itself, the function of history technology is to vitalize equally the radiant energy fields that define pre- and post-history. How does this occur? The answer lies in the following pattern. This pattern, anchored by the 14 galactic activation units on either side of the mystic column, describes the vibratory infrastructure, not only of DNA, but of the universal light body, holonomically registered at the cellular, individual, organism, planetary, solar, and galactic levels. This vibratory infrastructure can also be read as the structural matrix supporting the wave harmonic of history as it passes through the 5200 tune synchronization beam. Without the activation of the two-way flow during passage through the synchronization beam, the planetary light body would not be crafted. This two-way flow of the Zuvuya, the coming form, and the returning to the Hunabku, the galactic core.
That's what I was just visualizing. I was just visualizing the two-way flow. Go ahead.
No different than the matrix of the etheric grid of the planetary light body, the structural matrix supporting the wave harmonic of history is a fractal of the universal galactic constant. The conscious activation of the Earth grid from its resonant core to its outer electromagnetic grid sheath is holomonically paralleled by the history-bridging technology extruding activation of DNA. Indeed, technology is the scaffold surrounding the etheric grid of the planet. At the same time, it can equally be said that the galactic amplification of the resonant planetary grid defines the moment called history. We're firing the grids in 2011, man. Remembering that history is the 5,125-year diameter technology extruding phase of vibratory DNA acceleration, the bridge between the primordially radiant phase of prehistory and the resonantly synthesized phase, the post-history. Let us actually map out this historic passage of the 64-unit genetic keyboard. As demonstrated in Earth Ascending, this 64-unit grid can be superimposed on the planet body. The horizontal dividing line corresponds to the equator. The vertical far left hand row corresponds to the meridian running through Great Pyramid of Egypt, some 30 degrees east of Greenwich. The numbering of the 64 units according to the number pattern of the Ben Franklin magic square of 8 defines the actual pattern of movement uniting the genetic keyboard. Following the numbering of the magic square, we see the movement connecting numbers 1 through 16 and 49 through 64. Is in the upper half of the grid, while the movement connecting the numbers 17 through 48 occurs completely in the lower half of the grid. Applied to our equation, numbers 1 through 16 correspond to prehistory numbers, 17 through 48 to history, and the numbers 49 to 64 to post-history. This means that the passage of Earth through the galactic synchronization beam corresponds to the movement through the entire lower half of the 64-unit genetic keyboard and historic technologically activated phase of genetic unfolding. When we speak of the counterspin of history coming to an end and the return spin, the final synchronization of post-history, commencing, we're referring to the passage from 48 to 49. Since these 64 DNA code numbers correspond to I Ching hexagrams, the passage from history to post-history is marked by the passage from the well, 48, to revolution molting 49. But this is revolution without guns. It's a revolution by and for the earth. What? Initiated by the revolution of the earth's resonant field. The final 26-year synchronization phase of the Great Cycle, 1986 to 2012, corresponds to the movement from 49 to 64. Once accelerated phases into synchronization, harmonic convergence, the increased harmonic frequency of the planetary field translates into a speeding up, which is almost timeless. The result is a compression of time through the final quarter stage of the genetic keyboard. Conclusion. At number 64, adjacent to number 1, the joining of the alpha and omega, corresponds to passage from the synchronization beam, 13.0.0.0.0 AD, 2012. This is when time is. The new heaven, new earth, and entry into galactic synchronization. Okay, I need to walk around and pace. See you next